Well, if it isn't an A-level action figure on a D-level desktop. This is Internet Personality Vangelis, and today I'm looking at Optimus Prime, a Studio Series Deluxe class, entry number 112, from the upcoming film Transformers 1. Almost a promotional figure for the movie, Transformers Uno's fully animation status perhaps means this toy will not suffer as much as other pre-Cinema Studio Series pieces, like the VW Bumblebee from Bumblebee: A Bumblebee Story. He's also one of the first A-level Transformers toys, a new Hasbro concept where a couple of figures in each franchise are intended to just be wantonly available at all times. In the case of our bots, that is this Optimus Prime and Studio Series 86 Bumblebee. I guess we'll see how that plays out.
This video was sponsored in part by ToyHacks.com. Use the code 40th anniversary through the month of August 2024 for 15% off your order of labels and other paraphernalia. Using the code supports the channel. Supporting the channel feeds the machine.
As soon as I got Cybertron's Chris Hemsworth out of the package, the first thing that struck me about this figure was its tactile density. The hand feel is meaty, especially down in those long, Gundam-thick calves. Speaking of Gundams, Optimus definitely has some anime robot proportions going on with his tiny thighs and svelte flanks. I can't speak to screen accuracy yet myself due to only spectating a pair of trailers and not really living neck-deep in movie hype, but this doesn't seem terribly far off from the full-body Orion Pax pics I have available to me. And neither does a major point of contention, the warmer gray color of his traditionally cold-toned, if not outright silver, parts. He definitely looks more yellow than blue compared to Megatron in several images where they share the screen, so I suspect this is for the sake of accuracy. The plastic in question has a slight metallic sheen that really helps it look interesting in person, along with the requisite red and blue, but I can assure you that if you're writing the comment about him looking pre-yellowed, you are in fact the very first person to think of that joke, and I for one feel inspired by your wit and swagger. Studser 112 comes with 3 accessories: an axe, a funny-looking thing, and a matrix. The axe is for plugging into and over one of his fists, as one often does nowadays, and it looks fine. Extremely rote and kinda boring, with a vaguely cynical take on the axe base orb, as it both cuts off abruptly on the bottom and has 2 alt-mode storage tabs sticking off either side. The funny-looking thing does nothing in robot mode, but it can be stored in Optimus Prime's backpack. Oddly, despite obviously having tabs and pegs, the piece uses a weird crisscross mishmash of slots within tabs on both ends to mount in place, and the end result feels kinda terrible. It doesn't fall out easily, but it can get knocked out easily. The axe can tab into either slot on the outside of the backpack, and in general I find this accessory storage to be somewhere between messy and uninspiring. Functional, but unlikely to be my own solution versus a small zip bag. The Matrix can, of course, store within a chamber in Prime's unfoldable pectoral panel, but the peg in there is weirdly wiggly, resulting in a strangely offset look for the Matrix no matter how I adjust it. However, I am so pleased to see a fresh take on having a toy actually hold a Matrix of leadership, as the standard knuckle-hinged finger wad haphazardly squeezes the accessory and hopefully it doesn't fall out, is something I'm very tired of. Studio Series Uno Prime has slots nestled amidst his knuckle sculpts that make use of tabs on the Matrix piece, and while it's still a little fiddly, it's way less fiddly than some Matrix grippers of the last few years. I almost forgot to mention this, so I'm squatting in a hotel bathroom to let you know you can take the smokestacks on Prime's shoulders and use them as little pistols. And unlike the Prime Changer, you can put both pistols in one hand to make it look like a fancy weapon. I suspect he doesn't actually do this in the movie, but it looks pretty cool. The lovely hand feel of this guy is bolstered by some pretty lovely articulation. The head ball socket joint, it's got waggle, it's got up and down, obviously you can look around as well. It's a great neck ball joint. The shoulders are a little complicated, but they can move forward and backward, they can move outward like this. The axis of movement does bring the shoulders up a little bit, but they never really collide with the head, so I don't mind. There's also a bicep swivel and an elbow joint and a wrist, but the interesting part is also this pseudo-lateral movement. Now this is where the size of the bicep hunk is a bit unfortunate. It's more so the size of the boobs in the back, because it bumps into stuff a lot before you can get some really good use out of that joint. It's mostly there for very powerhouse standing, but if you want to have, like, an arm swinging forward, you bump into too much stuff. There's a transformation joint you can kind of use in tandem with that stuff if you don't mind breaking up the look of things, so you have an option there. But, yeah, the shoulders, I believe I got the impression they're contentious. I think they're fine, but I do wish that there had been, like, I don't know, some kind of, like, wiggle in here. There is a mid-torso swivel in place of a waist joint, and then this is a weird part. There's this thing. It looks like it's talking, right? And this is to get, you know, the skirt out of the way for kicking the legs forward. But then it also kinda clicks in like that, but I don't know if it's supposed to do that, and if it does, then obviously it doesn't move up as easily, but when it moves up, then it naturally tends to just sit up there, which looks awful. I don't know about this thing. Generally, I find it looks bad more often than it looks good, and I wish that it didn't have the entire middle of the crotch moving up and down, because it looks like a mouth slash jaw slash animate diaper. And this crotch detail's like present again underneath it. It's so friggin' weird, and I don't know what happened here, but it plays very strangely. That aside, the ball socket connection on the hips is very big. Like, the ball joints themselves actually have some side-to-side organic wiggle in addition to a thigh swivel. That's really cool in concept. For the transformation, that can get kind of annoying, though, you'll see later on. The knee joint is a single hinge, but it bends a little bit deeper than 90, and that helps a lot when the lower leg is so much bigger than the thigh. I kind of wish the proportions were a tad different on this. The toe can wiggle for transformation. There is a dedicated ankle tilt, which is always helpful. And the hand feel in general, especially here on the knee joint, that's just milkshake hand feel. It's a nice toy to mess around with, to pose. It's got, at times, very slight high-end action figure feel, than at other times, usually involving this. Like, one side will friction off, and you're like, oh, I better plug that back on. The shoulder design is like, it feels both high-end and a little bit cluttered. I think the articulation on this turned out pretty well, but bear in mind there are things here that may not acclimatize to your specific niche tastes, depending on those specific niche tastes that you yourself may have. This Optimus design doesn't have to accomplish a ton to achieve his Cybertronian alt mode, but especially after the Bumblebee movie opening scene deluxes, I need the process to be fun, and this piece has a lot of give and take. The basic steps are fine, and several are legit good times for my fingers, like the super solid and linear movements found in the torso and shoulders. However, bringing everything together for the finished vehicular assembly is fiddly, almost harkening back to very outdated notions of fiddly for me. Like, the thighs are on such freewheeling ball sockets, it's very easy for them to need fine tweaking to line up their tabs with the slots inside of the forearms. And while the grip holds for the hands should be the easiest step in the world, the pliably durable material the pegs are made from, in tandem with their being mounted on the outside of the very aforementionedly freewheeling leg parts, means even that step can feel astonishingly fiddly and non-linear. The highs are high, while the lows are often outright shocking to me. Every time I transform this Prime, it's an even 50-50 of enjoyment and wishing I was done already. I am a long-standing, oft-recorded enjoyer of Cybertronian alt modes. This one's fine. It doesn't rock my socks through the sun, but I like the little switch-ups and mask placements to give Transformers 1's heroic leader his own twist on being a red box that's dragging a blue plank. That said, there is a literal void in the connective tissue between the red box and blue plank, where there's just a jumble of crotch sitting next to Prime's forearms. I don't care nearly as much about his exposed hands, since they both have something to grip onto and also blend in with the general blue plank mass. I just wish the general silhouette of the side profile was a touch smoother, especially since the Prime Changer version of Optimus pulls it off in a much slicker way. The axe accessory has a storage space in back using its two obvious tabs in tandem with makeshift kneecap slots, while hugging around a little connective brick between the legs. No idea what the hole in the axe head is for now that I think of it. The matrix can just stay in the chest, and it looks like its mono-eye appearance within the windshield is actually a piece of poster imagery, so perhaps this is just raw accuracy at work. That weird thing from before makes its function known in alt mode as it plugs onto the front bumper to simulate a pair of deployed cannons, bolstered by the side-mounted smokestack guns. The whole piece is made of a palm-style plastic, giving it a durable and flexible hand feel. However, that material also makes it sticky as hell to mount or remove, and it actually has nowhere else to go in alt mode. Not having seen the film, I just feel nothing when I look at this accessory in action. I'm sure context will help, but I'd rather have seen a couple more moving parts on Optimus instead, or maybe an alternate faceplateless head swap for more of an Orion Pax visual option. Studio Series 112 Optimus Prime is a very mixed bag for me. His robot mode feels lovely, and as an action figure, he's quite fun to mess around with. And I know there's a Megatron incoming later this year to stand alongside or against him. But the transformation and alt mode have all kinds of baggage that constantly drag down those parts of the experience for me, though I'm not absolutely turned off either aspect entirely. I think this toy suffers in part for landing in my hands the same day as Prime Changer Optimus, and right after I spent a decent amount of time being pleasantly surprised by that figure to boot. It is not strictly worse by any means, as I feel both toys have their own victories over one another, but I do think it's kind of unfortunate just how comparable this is to the Prime Changer when this Studio Series Deluxe should be a flagship figure, doubly so with its mildly vaunted A-level status. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelis, and it's by the power of all my Prime patrons and YouTube mega members that I'm comfortable enough to have not only pre-ordered this figure, but also entirely forgot having pre-ordered it until GameStop called me, and I found out it wasn't the Studio Series 86 swoop I was expecting.